Then I'll get started. Thank you very much for those warm words. It's a great shame I'm not able to join you. But just as you guys are all in the countryside somewhere in Ukraine, I am also in the countryside somewhere in deepest Russia. You can tell by the setting I'm in that the room is bare wood walls and all very simple. It's rustic, but we do have a good phone connection. So I can work from here, which is great. So we're going to talk a little bit about translating slang and swearing today. I would like to emphasize a couple of points before I start. I'm not an academic. I am also not really a trained translator. There was translation as part of my degree, but the degree was in linguistics, so most of what I know about translation I have learned on the job, samouchka. As such, what I'm going to talk about is observations for what we have come up against in our work and solutions that we've found to deal with those situations. And I'm well aware that many times this has been done many times before. I'd be very interested to hear from you guys if you have ideas, other solutions, maybe material that we could look at and study to keep improving, because there's always room for learning more. So what we'll do is we'll look at some examples of the work we do. Most of this is based on subtitling, and that has its own limitations, which I'll talk about briefly. We'll look at some examples, screenshots, and then it'll be open to questions. So without further ado, this is about swearing and slang, so parental advisory. There will be explicit content in this presentation. That said, I believe that all translators and interpreters, as people who work with words, I believe you can't be allergic to all the manner of language that there is out there. I think it just comes with the profession. Certainly if you are a court interpreter, you're less likely to encounter fruity language, shall we say, than if you work in film. But nevertheless, it's a real factor of life, and not everybody speaks in some kind of highfalutin, intellectual manner. And we need to not only know those words and those terms, but also be equipped for ways of dealing with them. It's nowhere near as simple as it may seem. So if you're not prepared to handle a couple of swear words, you can fuck off. If you're still here, then let's get started. First of all, brief intro. I've done that. I'll talk to you briefly about subtitles, because that defines a lot of what we do here. Then I'll discuss the 4 tricks. I don't know if we can call them tricks, but let's try that. 4 ways that we found of dealing with the situations we encounter. Those are what I would call equivalence, infixations to deal with Russian prefixes and suffixes. There's a way of dealing with unusual expressions and how to consider the metadata surrounding that information. And then there's a concept that I just made up a term for called a transferred swear epithet, which we'll look into a bit more later. And I'll conclude with some information about the word ass, and a quick link to a series that we're doing on YouTube, which might be useful for people interested in this kind of topic. So briefly about subtitles. Subtitles are not the text of a film on the screen. If they are, then they're bad subtitles, because there is basically never time to put all of the text of a film onto the screen. As such, they are heavily edited, often interpreted versions of what was actually said. Why is that the case? Well, there are all kinds of guidelines, 2 types of guidelines principally, which we must try and follow when creating subtitles in order to make them watchable, in order not to ruin the film. So the first group are technical guidelines, and they're the ones that count in what I'm about to talk about. The principal one of those is what's called reading speed, or characters per second. Now, different languages and different countries have a different understanding of reading speeds. Sweden, Scandinavia, for example, has something like a 12 characters per second reading speed, which to me is quite slow. I'm sure people like the Italians have something like a 25 characters per second reading speed because they do everything quickly. But in English, at least on the international sort of level, 17 characters per second is an accepted speed. As such, we obviously speak a lot more quickly than that. The average rate of speaking is 80 to 120 words per minute. If you take some TV series, you're edging on 110, 120 words per minute. And I'm not going to do a recalculation, but essentially that's going to be a lot more than 17 characters per second. So there is no time to use all of the words. Another technical limitation on us is that each subtitle should be less than 6 seconds long. 6 seconds may not sound like much, but when there's a block of text on your screen for 6 seconds for the whole of a film, for 6 seconds of a film, it'll seem like it's there forever. It can take a lot of time in film time. So subtitles always have to be shorter than that. They should also be longer than 1 second, apart from certain exceptions. And 1 second also may not sound like much at all, but quite the opposite. It's plenty of time to read a 2, 3, 4 word subtitle. Maybe more. Subtitles also should have frames between them. So 1 second of film is split into either 24 or 25 frames per second, which means that you cannot just wedge all the subtitles in there one after the other with no gaps. You have to have gaps, which means you're losing even more time, which means you have to edit down the text even more. The gaps are there because when you're watching a film, you only see the subtitles in your peripheral vision. And if you see them disappear and appear, even if there's only a split second difference, you register that and you drop your eyes down to read it. You take your eyes off the film. If there's just a constant flow of text, it's very difficult to follow when they change because you're looking at it out of your peripheral vision. And as such, you can miss a subtitle appearing on screen. So there has to be a gap between them. And the final one is that makes especially fast-paced TV series difficult to subtitle is that subtitles should ideally stop at a shot change. Now, if it's within the same scene, you can keep them over a shot change, but certainly between scenes, subtitles have to stop. That can also be a real challenge for subtitling when somebody says something in the last couple of second or two of a scene, and you have to put a subtitle up there, not too early so as to ruin the surprise or the suspense, but also not so late so that there's no time to watch it, or so that it drags on to the next scene. So those are the technical guidelines that mean the basic ones, which mean are our limitations on what kind of text, what amounts of text, etc. we can put into a subtitle. That's why subtitles aren't really translation, they're more a kind of interpreting. There are also actual textual guidelines. I'm not going to go into them here, but just so that the shape of the text on the screen also works as a code for the viewer and tells them something about what's going on. So given those limitations, bearing them in mind, let's now have a look at some of these sort of phenomena that we've found in translating slang and swearing, and how we try and deal with them. One of the first ones is what I would call linear equivalence. What does this mean? Basically, you can't translate slang directly. Certainly not between Russian and English. I haven't studied other languages so closely, but words that work in Russian, if you translate directly into English, simply don't work. So, for example, as a basic example, you meet somebody in a bar that you don't like. He doesn't like you, and he might say, "Иди нахуй." Now, naturally, you can't say, as a direct translation, "Go to the cock." in English. Somebody might understand that you are offending them, but they really have no clue what you're saying. So instead of translating it, we have an equivalent. The equivalent is fuck off. As soon as you realize that there is this equivalence and not a translatability between the slang registers of these different languages, you'll then see that there's another phenomenon in play, certainly again between English and Russian, not sure about other languages. And that is that there is a linear progression in both languages of this equivalence. So we can start with the basic swear word that we want to say, and then we'll find that there is a more, let's say, gentle euphemism at one end, and then there's a more extreme version of the swear word at the other end. I didn't manage to properly set up my presentation so that it would go one by one. I was hoping to, but technology got the better of me. So the whole table will appear now, and we'll just have to run through it. So what am I talking about? On the left, we've got the gradation of swearing, right? We've got the gentle euphemism, the rough euphemism, the swear word itself, and then dropping an F-bomb or a C-bomb. That's an English term. The equivalent Russian would be трехэтажный мат, или however many etaji you want. And so if we take as our basic expression dahuya is what we're working with, then we'll find that there's a more gentle euphemism, which is dachrena. Chren is obviously its own thing, horseradish, and it's become a euphemism for this expression. That's the gentle version. The rougher version would be dochira. So here we're already much closer to the word hui, which we're trying to avoid by using a euphemism, but it's still not the actual word. You then got the actual swear word, and then you can, if you really want to get carried away in expressing yourself, you create an entire expression out of it. So this would go from dachrena to dachira to dahuya to pizdец, блядь, их, сука, dahuya тут. Just as an example. That might be if you're in an action film and there's lots of enemies that you're trying to shoot. Now, the English, it turns out, has a similar linear equivalence. So the expression is shitload. That means a lot, dahuya. But you can use a euphemism that sounds a bit similar, like shedload. So that would be your gentle euphemism. Now, we all know that a shed is a little sarai in your garden. So a shed load could mean a shed full of things, but we also know that shed is a euphemism for shit. So we start with shed load, then we go to crap load. Crap is also, it means shit, it means excrement, but it's a slightly gentler word. I could never say shit in front of my grandparents, but I might perhaps have been able to say crap, for example. So that's its sort of level of rudeness. So we can then do it to crap load, then shit load. And then if you want to drop F-bombs and C-bombs and be expressive, you can say shit the bed, there's fucking shitloads of the cunts. And there you have a properly offensive expression using equivalence in English of what the Russian was. As you see, there's no way of translating them directly. Pizdец, блядь. I mean, that would be cunt, whore. It just means nothing. We have our own versions. So we have to try and find those equivalents. You cannot translate them. And interestingly, when we see this very often with inexperienced translators, and not only inexperienced, even experienced ones, they might see an expression like tam dachira chivota in a sentence in something we're translating, and because they're aware that it is slang in Russian, they will almost automatically go with something like there's a shitload of, there's a fuckload of, and leave it at that because that's slang, right? Well, no. If the author had wanted to say that, he'd have said tam dahuya. He didn't. He was using a euphemism. It might have been a rough one, but he was using a euphemism. We have them in English too, so you need to be aware of these, brush up on them, and use them appropriately. A lot of the time with television, because of age restrictions, they will use something, a euphemism, which is close to rude but not quite rude. and we need to emphasize that we need to repeat that in English. I literally yesterday looked at some subtitles where there was some Russian mud, and the English translation had removed it. I don't know why. We're more liberal with swearing in English in film than Russian is, so I put it back in. So that is an example of linear equivalence, finding an equivalent and then finding the correct scale of rudeness. We have a resource that we're putting together to, it's a constantly growing thing, to house all of this information, but there's always more to add. So that's about linear equivalence. Let's have a look at a brief example. So this is from the TV series Patriot, where the hero is talking to his ex-wife. Ты родная, какого худенького моему детенышу фамилию поменяла, а? Now every Russian knows that какого худенького, well, sounds ridiculous, so they'll have a little giggle, but they also know that it means какого хуя. As a native English-speaking translator, you may not know that. You may need to look it up, try and guess. But if you do that, what you'll do is come up against the fact that that is a euphemism. It's a slightly funny one. So what can we do for it in English? It's close enough. It's got the right beginning, ch and u, to make it obvious what the word is. So it's not a really hidden one. But it's still not that. So in English, we came up instead with, why the F did you change my kid's name, dear? Now, if you're not a native English speaker, you may not know this, but the F is frequently used instead of the fuck. Why the fuck? You can write it just as an F, but more correct would be EFF. So I felt that was a particularly good rendition of that kind of euphemism. Another quick example from the same TV series, Patriot. Shop owner walks into his shop to find that something's crashed through the ceiling, and and he says, "Det chos a yokelman," and I don't know how to pronounce that, so please correct me if that was wrong. And again, this is obviously a funny euphemism, funny made-up word for the situation, trying to avoid a swear word. As such, we went with "what the fudge." The English natural expression would be "what the fuck," but if we're using a euphemism, then we can go with "fudge" instead. So there, that's about finding an equivalent and recognizing your equivalent's place on the scale of swearing. So that was our first trick. Second up, Russian has this fantastic ability, and if I was a language, I would be jealous of Russian for this. It has prefixes and suffixes, and you can stick them onto words in all manner of combinations, and you receive just literally thousands of new versions of the word, and it can be extremely creative. That's why Russians are very proud about their the creativity in their swearing. Now, the English can do this a little bit, but nowhere near as much. And so one of the other solutions we've found for dealing with this when we come across a Russian swear word which has had bits stuck on the beginning and end or both, is what's called an infixation. An infixation is where you take your main word and you put insert a word into the middle of it. Any native English speaker will know most of these. Just some examples from Russian. You've got ебать becomes заебастый, could become хуй becomes нахуйник, наебывать, так далее. So those are just some examples of prefixes and suffixes being added. The infixation phenomenon in English is when you put a word in the middle of another word. So instead of saying amazing, you could say fucking amazing. And that has the effect of, well, it's funny, first of all, it's emphatic, and it's a version that we can use to make a word flex the way the Russian word has flexed. So, for example, the Russian might be ahuyet, and you can then go fucking amazing. Depending on your intonation, that can be good or bad. Similar to that, we can then go with taking a set expression and inserting a swear word into it. So the set expression is to beat somebody black and blue. In this case, in Russian it might be "Zbili его нахуй," and in English it will be "they beat him black and fucking blue." You don't have to hyphenate it, but it makes it easier to read, to realize what's happening. So that's another example, similar sort of trick, but slightly different version, because it's not just a word, but a whole phrase. I should note, most foreigners know the word fuck, but there are a lot more swear words in the English language than that. It's not all about fucks, so you can use it with bloody as well, for example. So abso-bloody-lutely would be a very enthusiastic way of saying absolutely. And then you can go with creating a phrase around this. So I think it's my feeling that the English phrases are an equivalent of the Russian prefixes and suffixes, in the sense that they're where we have fun with our swear words. So we can be funny with them because of the context we put them in a small phrase. Where, you know, in Russian you can call somebody or a situation "zaebasti." In English we don't have that, but we can make it funny by putting it in a shortish phrase. For example, "he got all cunty." By sticking the Y on the end, it's an unusual expression to use. It comes from the film The Gentleman, Guy Ritchie, and it's an unusual usage of it, and because it's in the sentence, "he got all," you know, that's something we're used to hearing about with a different ending. He got all irritated, he got all embarrassed, and suddenly to drop the C-bomb in there makes it amusing, catches your attention, makes it sound different. And the Russian from that might be "on вообще охуел." Now the next example is something I think is a very interesting example that we have used we've observed in other situations too, which is an inversion, what I call an inversion. A lot of the time in Russian, where there is a rhetorical question, the English will be a statement instead. So now we have rhetorical questions in English, of course, we use them, but the way they're used in Russian translates much better as a statement into English than as repeating a rhetorical question. So the "А ты не охуел?" Rhetorical question, which is obviously not expecting any kind of an answer, translates badly as, I can't even think what it would be in bad English, but you can flip it into a statement and turn it into "don't be a dick about it." Now we're keeping, interestingly, the "hui," cock, and dick situation there, so that hasn't completely transferred, but what has changed is that it's gone from being a question to a statement. So that's how we try and deal with Russian prefixes and suffixes. Mostly it's with infixations, or bottom right corner, turn it into a phrase, a sentence, and it'll be something roughly equivalent. We can have, so I haven't got any examples for you there, I'm afraid. I don't know how that happened. Never mind, we'll move on. Third up is dealing with unusual expressions. Now, we had the great honor a couple of years ago to subtitle Kalina Krasnaya by Vasily Shukshin. The film had been restored by Mosfilm's restoration department. They were sending it to the Venice Film Festival for restored films, and they sent it to us for subtitling. Now, I don't know if you've watched this ever, or indeed recently, but apart from Shukshin being a fantastic actor, it also has his wonderful writing in it. And his writing is amazing because he just makes up huge amounts of what he's saying, of the text, of expressions, things like that, which make his characters very colourful, of course. But that provides an additional challenge for when you're trying to translate this, because, well, how do you deal with it? How do you understand it in the first place? And if you've understood it, how then do you deal with it? Now, I would So the screenshot here is from our channel Shakespeare Pledged. If you'd like to, I won't go on much about this, but if you'd like to go onto the channel, have a watch of the video. It's only 8 minutes long or so, but that should provide you a bit more information about how we dealt with that situation. The result of this, of course, is that our comments are turned on, and people are allowed to comment on what they see on our channel. And a chap called Ayur made a comment, which I thought was very interesting for this talk here. And so I'll address that now. Если носитель языка оригинала приходится догадываться о значении сленгового выражения, то, может быть, и калька подойдет, ведь тогда иностранный зритель будет в равном положении с оригинальным зрителем. So he's got a good point. It's an interesting point, but he's not entirely right. He's forgetting a couple of very important factors. What's he forgetting? He's forgetting what I call metadata. And the metadata is all the information that comes around what's actually being said when you're watching a film. So the metadata can be the intonation of how it was said. It could be the body language of the speaker. It could be word associations that you have with the words the speaker said. Or it could be collocations, standard collocations that are used and that tell you as a native speaker of the source language certain things. Now, he brings an example, Zabieg w Shirinu. So Shukshin's character gets out of prison, goes to town, has some money, and he asks the local fixer guy to help him organize a Zabieg w Shirinu, by which he means a big party. This is entirely a Shukshin expression. It doesn't exist. And if you were to see it just on paper without any explanation, you could easily be lost, native Russian speaker or not. However, given the context of the scene, given the way he's talking, given the way he looks, the way he moves, the intonation, given all of the metadata, it's a lot easier for you as a native Russian speaker to guess at what he means than it is for a native English speaker if we were to translate that more literally. I haven't really thought about a literal translation because it would be bad, but Zabieg w Shirinu, a broad runaround, maybe, something like that. If you translated it as a broad runaround, your viewers would be completely lost. And well, there'd be no point in doing that. Your job as a subtitler is to make a film understandable. It's also as visible as you can be, so that they can get on with watching the film and not reading it. As such, Ayur made an interesting point, but I think that he's missing the fact that you, as a Russian speaker, will have picked up all of that metadata, which I, as a foreigner, may not have and probably won't have picked up. And so if we don't, as subtitlers, clarify it slightly, then we're doing our viewers a disservice. For Zabieg w Shirinu, in the end, I think we came up with to have a knees up. A knees up is a good slangy expression to have a party. It's understood by most people, native English speakers at least, and it's a fun expression. It's not offensive to anyone. It's not sort of tainted by any particular negativity or anything else. So it just means to have a good time. As such, we delivered the fact that it was in informal and I don't know about slangy, but informal language. We made it understandable to those who weren't able to interpret the metadata. Sorry if I harped on about that, not being able to see anybody's faces. I've no idea if you're nodding at me enthusiastically or scratching your head saying, what the hell? So it's unclear to me whether it's all clear and understood or not. But let's move on. That's one of the ways of dealing with unusual expressions.
Hello?
So
can you hear
here's
me?
some more unusual expressions.
Well, it's a huge pity that you cannot join us here, but please believe me that our audience is reacting very vividly.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
I haven't all left because it's too rude.
Yeah, continue, please.
Okay. So this example is also from Patriot. Patriot is just very rich in swear words and unusual language, so I chose it for that reason. They're talking about a church, a new religious organization sort of starting up in their town, and how they get people to come to their meetings. And he says, Kutuzov был, говорит, шняга конская, но печеньки классные. Now, шняга конская, if you didn't have any native English speaker translating this, you didn't have any Russians around you to find out what the hell that meant, you could spend a long time working out that that's just his made up thing. Shняga exists, konska exists, you don't find them together, you would scratch your head and think, what the hell is that? But fortunately, we have native Russian speakers on our team, so we consult with each other the whole time, and we're able to work out that no own invented language, and it just means a bunch of bullshit kind of thing. So we then thought, well, how can we render that in English? We don't want to render it so that we're going to end up confusing people. One of the difficulties in this, again, is we could, of course, invent something for that character, for him to say that's new and unusual. The problem with that, there are two principal problems with that. One of them is most viewers will watch it and think that you've just done shit subtitles. That's it. They'll just be like, well, those are crap subtitles. Because the written word, even if it's written and it's said, appearing at the same time as somebody speaking it, the written word is interpreted differently to the spoken. It'll just look like bad subtitling rather than somebody speaking idiosyncratically. The other thing is that our subtitles are usually done for festivals, for film markets, for that kind of thing. So they are watched by people who are not exclusively native English speakers. If this was going to broadcast on the BBC, that would be one thing, because I'd be pretty sure that 99% of the people watching it would be native British English speakers. It's going to be broadcast on CNN, the same thing. But very often these are going to film festivals and film markets where you might have a buyer from Spain next to a buyer from China watching this. And they speak English, of course, that's why they're there. But if you get deep into slang, you're going to lose them. And if they get disinterested, then you can actually lose the sale of the property of the TV series. And that's your fault as the subtitler for being too enthusiastic, shall we say. So we try and strike a balance between weird, unusual phrases and making it understandable. What do we come up with in English in this case? We came up with, Kutuza says it's horse shit, but there's free cookies. Now, horse shit is a bit rude, but it's not too rude to fit here. Shняga konska, we've also got konska. So we've managed to keep that horse link. There's a bit of something similar there. You could say bullshit easily, equally. We managed to keep a little bit of the link of the original, but also to use an expression that people understand to mean, nonsense, waste of time, something that isn't true. So I was quite pleased with that. TV series Olga. God, it's easily one of the most difficult things we ever subtitle, because in that, if you think I'm speaking quickly, they speak double the speed, and it's all slang. So this is the father of the family, grandfather of the family, and I think he's looking for some medicine in the aptechka, and all he can find is как это называется, уголь рафинированный, или как там. So there's charcoal things that Russians take. So he says, вы нормальным чем-то болеете или только дышите? Now, unfortunately, there wasn't the time on screen to deliver the whole thing. So in English, we had to shorten it down. And we used, again, a slangy expression, which, well, certainly all native English speakers will understand. A lot of non-native English speakers wouldn't necessarily understand it, but because of the context around what was happening, we see people running to the toilet with diarrhea, we understand that that's what he means. So what's all this? Or you guys only ever get the runs. To get the runs is to have diarrhea. So that's another way of dealing with these people's fantastically creative expressions. Essentially, understand the point of what they're trying to say, simplify a little, try and match the level of rudeness or informality, and come up with something that fits. Those are the sort of three tasks that we try and bear in mind when doing this. Okay, and sorry. So this one, you may, if you studied literature at school, have come across an expression called a transferred epithet. And that's when you use a word that is usually used to describe one noun to describe another. An example of a transferred epithet might be, he pointed at me with an angry finger. Now, obviously, fingers can't have emotions. They can't be angry. So you can't basically describe a finger as angry. But if you use it in the construction of a transferred epithet, so from him being angry to the finger being angry, then it emphasizes that anger. It's slightly unusual, catches the reader's attention, etc. I was trying to come up with a way of describing what we do in this situation, and it occurred to me that it's a bit like a transferred epithet, so I just call it a transferred swear-epithet. We use this when there's no time or no space on screen to deliver all of the volume of text or swearing that we want to deliver. We also use it if occasionally there's a reason, there's some linguistic dissonance, which means that it doesn't work, it doesn't fit. I wish I had an example for you, but unfortunately I never saved any as we were doing them, and going back through hundreds of hours of film to find one example was not within my capability of linguistic dissonance, I mean. But I do have one for where there was no time or space on screen. So this is basically where you have a scene where there's something happening and somebody swears, let's say, possibly multiple times. There's no space on the screen or time for you to put all of that information into this subtitle. And so you can then take that flavor, that degree of swearing or emotion, and transfer it over to the next sentence. You can bring it forwards, but that usually doesn't work so well. So better to transfer it over to a next one. So, for example, we've got a situation here where this guy who's lying on the ground was just inside that building, and they were having a big heated argument, and he decided he would escape by jumping out through that non-existent window. So he jumped out, fell over, hurt his leg, and in Russian he says "suka." Because of what he was, it's, you know, "suka" is relatively rude, bitch, whatever, but it's not that bad. Because of what they were saying in the previous scene, which is basically carried on from this, so it's not, there wasn't a scene change, just a camera angle change. Because there was no time to fit it in, we figured that, okay, let's transfer that swear to the next line. So instead of saying damn or, you know, God damn it or something like that, we went with a bit more dramatic, shit the bed. It's a fantastic expression. It's quite awful. It's surprise, it's disappointment, you know, two in one. And because of the previous flavor of what he was saying, and given the current situation and that we have the time, because he only says one word in Russian, we decided to put it in here. So that's another way that we deal with language that we feel is important to get the flavor of the scene but can't be fitted into where it is. We'll often transfer it to a later sentence, perhaps a later camera change, etc. So those are the four kind of tricks that we've developed to deal with difficult situations in swearing and things. You know, with all that said, sometimes it's just easy. So, for example, here's this girl describing her relationship with people at school, and she talks about how they talk about her, describe her. They say, "Ну, типа малолетка тупая" или "меркантильная сука," and translated into English, very easy. They're like that dumbass. Sorry about the intonation, or materialistic bitch. So that was easy. Came out meaning almost word for word the same thing. Didn't have to think of any equivalence or anything else. I probably included this because that is the exception that proves the rule. Rarely can you actually relate word for word what was said in Russian and put that into English. This situation, it worked. So I'm wrapping up now. There's a fantastic video that I strongly recommend you all go and have a look at. This guy is a Finnish comedian. He's called Ismo, I-S-M-O. And if you Google Ismo ass video, you'll find this, where he spends about 10 minutes talking about the flexibility of the American word ass. It's fantastic. It's funny because of his delivery, but better than that, it's very educational about how it can be used for emphasis, how it can be used for nothing, how it can make something stronger, how it can mean quite the opposite of what it means. Just as a brief example, he says lazy ass means a very lazy person, whereas badass, lazy ass emphasizes the fact that he's lazy, whereas badass doesn't mean that he's the opposite of that. It means that he's actually very bad. Go look at that video. It's hilarious. And finally, Dima Puchkov Goblin and I have been doing a series of, this isn't on my channel, but if you look for it on YouTube, you'll find it. Been doing a series of videos about the film Gentleman, The Gentleman, where we talk about his translation of it and what he could have done, what some of those expressions actually mean, where they come from, all kinds of cultural and sociological stuff in there. We've done 3 videos so far, 2 published, 1 coming, and there'll be more because it's a huge film. So that's it. Thank you very much. I've prattled on. I have to leave you very shortly because there's a person waiting for me for a job interview. But do you have any questions as we're going at the moment?
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Thanks a lot for your presentation, for inventing terms for this presentation. That was absolutely amazing. And yes, we saw that video with dedicated to S, and
you've seen it. Good. Okay.
Yes, that was only the. No, I forgot how he formulated that, but yes, it's really funny. So,
yeah,
do we have questions in our audience? Yes.
Just a technical question. You're working with subtitles, so are subtitles in English happen to be longer than Russian swear words, or do you have to cut them down, or what's the usual balance?
Good question. Is the swearing longer? I haven't looked at that individually.
But general, in a general way.
Yeah. So basically, always for subtitles, you make them shorter than the spoken Russian. That's a basic rule. Just because there's no time. But often in swearing, actually, Russians will use 2 or 3 words. So if you remember the example from the first bit, there was somebody might say "без сука, блядь," and then go on to say something else. In English, you can't put those 2 words together like that. You might say, "Oh, for fuck's sake," but there's only 1 swear word in there. The closest you get would be "fucking hell," but hell isn't a swear word; it's just an expression. So there is that. Sometimes Russian uses more words than English does for that. But as a basic rule, no, subtitling, unfortunately, is very much a case of shortening material down. I think, on average, probably 30% less words in subtitles than in the whole text.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ще питанечка з онлайну.
Hi, this is Irina speaking. We have some comments and a question. The first is a comment from Olga Kameneva. Will, it's Olga Kameneva. Fantastic presentation. I hardly know half of Russian swear words, not to mention English. And also we have a question. Is it possible for foreigner to understand all Russian swear words? Because sometimes, depending on intonation, the same word can mean can have another meaning.
Yeah,
and
of
of course, how long
difficult.
how long did it take you to understand all the meanings?
Russian swearing is difficult principally because of all the prefixes and suffixes. That's what makes it so difficult for foreigners to do well. I think English swearing is difficult not because of that, but because of word choice, appropriateness, and perhaps context that you put swear words into English. So that's why the two of them have their own degrees of difficulty. For myself, I was protected. I was protected by all the Russians I knew for a long time. They wouldn't let me near swear words. And I don't know, I never took any particular interest myself. I wasn't a translator back then, you know, I was in business. I had no need to swear at people I was doing business with. But I remember one day an employee of mine described a previous employee as "да он мудила конченый." And I said, "He's what?" And he said, "Ой, извини, не надо было." And I said, "Я не понял просто слово, что ты там сказал?" And then he eventually explained to me that there's a word mudak, which can become mudila, and what it means and why and how. And that was the first time any Russian had introduced me to any kind of Russian swear word. And that would have been 2008, probably. So I'd been here for 5 years by then. Can you believe it? I didn't know any. I really didn't. I was very naive. After that, we started working with film, and naturally I had to wise up a bit and start learning about it. But even researching for this presentation, I found a lot of things that, you know, terms, expressions I'd never come across before. So we have a little database that we're building. We'll be adding to that. So hopefully we'll have a good sort of place to keep all this information. But yeah, it's taken me a long time. And Olga, привет. Olga was one of my students at the Высшая школа перевода years ago, now a very successful interpreter in St. Petersburg.
Okay, thank you. That's all with the questions for today.
No. Can I have...
Oh, no. Okay.
Yes, can I... first of all, I remember the joke. He said, I have spoken about some meanings of the word "s", but that is only the top of the iceberg. And now, my question, Will, have you ever had the experience of subtitling the same film differently, depending on the viewers, like for BBC or Chinese channel? It would be interesting to compare two versions.
Yeah. Not for a client, no. We did it once for our own entertainment.
Yeah, that's why I said it would be interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. No, we did do it once where for a client, because they wanted the uncut version, but they also wanted a version that was going to be shown at a festival. And it wasn't because it was going to be censored. It was because it needed to be simpler. There needed to be less idiom, so that, you know, buyers from different countries could understand it. So we did once. I can't remember what film it was now, but we did once produce. You know, a director's version, should we say, director's cut, and a marketable version. And it's interesting what changes, yeah. Maybe I should look that up and do a presentation about that someday.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. Thank you, Will. We really enjoyed your presentation, and we hope to see you again next year here in person.
Yes, look
Thank
forward
you.
to it. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Thank you for not running away when I started swearing.
We started smiling. Bye.